Good Sunday morning and welcome back to Access Houston. I'm your host, KG Smooth. Welcoming a couple of first-timers, a lot of great energy. He is the chairman of the board of Iconoclast Artist. Please, ladies and gentlemen, welcome Mr. Jovón Tyler. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, sir. Thank you for having me.
Yes, and he's the program director for Iconoclast Artist, Mr. Marlon Lizama. Did I say it right?
Yes. Good morning.
What's up, guys? How y'all doing today?
Good. We're glad to be here.
Man, glad to have you. So, tell us about Iconoclast Artist.
So Iconoclast Artist was a program that was born between an improbable friendship between myself and a pastor.
Okay.
And it all came from this word called impact. I have been an artist my entire life. I traveled for like 10 straight years. I did things with arts and dance and theater, and I came back home and I was super hyped to, get a job and create impact in my community and, the whole nine. And I realized that when I started working with nonprofits, I would always hear these words called impact and empowerment but it was always the minimal. It was always the minimal kind of impact. I got into grant writing and seeking out all these monies for these great programs that I would have in mind. And every time I would get these big opportunities, it would always be like a one and done sort of deals with our communities. And I grew up in the East End of Houston, and I came here at 9 years old. I was an immigrant, and so me working with these communities, to me was really special. And for me to go in and not do quality work, it killed me. It killed me. And because I lived in those apartment complexes, right? And for us to go in there and give T-shirts and a sandwich and take pictures of them and then leave, that would kill me. Yeah. And I went back and I caught a mentor of mine, and I asked him, I'm like, hey, listen, I want to create a school in the middle of downtown. I need you to give me an old building, and it's going to be a high quality, high level art school, and it's going to be the baddest school in the world, and I'm going to bring the best artists in the world, and they're going to come to Houston and inspire, and they're going to change everything. And he looked at me and said, like, that's dumb. That's dumb. He's like, nobody's going to go. Houston is too big. In order to make change, in order to make impact, you have to go where the kids are. And I knew I had to be in the schools. I knew I had to be in the schools that nobody wanted to be at. And then he said, I think I know someone just as crazy as you that might support you. And he introduced me to Dr. Matt Russell, and he's a pastor at St. Paul's Methodist. And he didn't tell me this, by the way, before I met him. And we went to lunch together, told him my idea of going into the schools, providing a really high-level creative writing program. Like, no, not diluting it at all. This is not we don't care about testing. We don't care about what system you have. It's really about the child. It's really about empowerment. It's about teaching them how to tell their story, finding their voice. Nothing above that. It's art for art's sake.
Yeah.
And he was like, let's do it. He's like, let's do it. And I was like, but for real though. And he's like, let's do it. Let's do it. I went back and quit my job, and Iconoclast Artist was born. And I love the friendship that brought this on, because it's really a man who I would never ever have met, right? If it wasn't for my mentor basically saying, this guy will help you. And we started with Sharpstown High School and Lee High School.
Okay.
And I mean, these are schools that at that time, they didn't have anything like this. They didn't have any arts programs, any creative writing programs. And I went up to the principal, and I was very genuine, and I was very transparent. I'm like, give me a year. I'm going to follow your students. I'm going to be here every week, and we're going to see if this program will create that impact that I'm talking about. And he said, all right, let's do it. And I was like, oh, snap, we're really doing it. We started doing it. We started creating the curriculum as we went along. I tried a lot of things with the students. I introduced them to so many poets that I felt that they should know, a lot of artists that they should know. I was amazed that our students didn't have favorite authors, they didn't have favorite poets, they didn't have favorite painters, because that's not in their world, right? And so when you're growing up with extreme poverty, when you're growing up with all these challenges of being undocumented, arts is not in your vocabulary.
And not only that, I mean, and in the public schools, their resources are scarce as well. And so, of course, there's no there's no way to get exposed to that. Yeah, that. Oh my gosh! You listen to Access Houston. We're talking to Marlon Lizama and Jovón Tyler from Iconoclast Artist. But yes, continue.
And everyone shares that struggle. I think the teachers share that struggle, right? Like they're so worried about making sure that these kids are on point to pass these tests that they get judged on, right? And
right. And that's all it's about. And it shouldn't be.
Absolutely.
I'm sorry. Yeah, that's ridiculous. Yeah.
And one thing that we figured out is our biggest allies need to be our teachers.
Yeah.
So how do we not only empower our students, but how do we empower our teachers?
Well, first of all, let's just, if this is the honesty hour, I mean, teachers don't get paid anything.
No.
They are the most important people in this country who spends the most time of the day with your child.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
And for education in this country to go so far back and behind the way that it has over these past few decades is astonishing to me. I mean, hell, when I was in high school, I mean, I thought that we were on the come up. I mean, we're like, we can't let China get ahead of us. We can't let, the Russians get ahead of us, all of this stuff.
Right.
And now, those two countries basically own us.
That's true.
And I'm not even going to go there on that side, but it's an attack. It's an attack, but not exonerated on a lot of other things. But we're not going to go there. It's an attack.
Yeah.
And teachers need to get paid just as much as these politicians out here.
I agree.
If we can totally be honest. I mean, I have friends that are teachers, and it's driving them to drink. But what really saddens me is that their love for these kids is so deep that they sacrifice and go into their own pockets to get the supplies and the things that they need. So their students can have what it is.
And there's no tax break for them for doing that. That was abolished and done away with in exchange for corporate tax breaks in the last bill that the United States Congress passed.
Oh, which screwed everybody.
Absolutely.
Everybody thought, I'm getting a little something extra. I even saw the bump.
Yeah.
And then, I do my taxes this year, and I get half of what I got back last year.
The sugar high.
I know people who who have the same income who got a $6,000 return and ended up owing. And so I'm like, this is what. Thanks, Congress. Thanks, Trump. Go ahead.
And one of the main things is it has to be a village, right? So if you want it to be a village, we have to learn how to empower everybody. So our grants, our grants that we started going for, basically were it doesn't only benefit our students, but how does it benefit the teachers? After the first year, we created a curriculum with HISD teachers. I was like, I don't want to hire anybody to come in and write this curriculum. We need the people that are always around the students. And if you had a chance to teach what you wanted to teach, who would you teach? And that, I mean, to a lot of our teachers, their eyes opened up, and you can tell it went back to that why I teach moment, right? Oh my gosh, yes. If I had a chance to teach James Baldwin, I would definitely teach James Baldwin. I would definitely teach Maya Angelou. I would definitely talk about Frida Kahlo and feminism. And I was like, let's create the curriculum around that. I'm like, let's do that. Kids need to know who Gil Scott-Heron was. Right? Kids need to know who Diggable Planets are. Rakim. And so so the perspective that we have on poetry is I always say that we work our way backwards. I can't go to a class of inner city school kids that are going through a struggle and say, all right, today we're breaking down Dickinson.
Right. Yeah.
They don't look at me like, who?
Let me ask this. What is the process or how does it work I know that there's a board. I don't know if it comes from a state level, if it's a federal level that goes down to the state, that goes down to, the school districts in said county or city. But who determines the curriculum for said school district and what it is that, they should focus on or not? Because to come to you, because, hearing all of that stuff, I'm like, well, it sounds like when I was coming up, I probably had those options to learn about, those people that you just named.
We didn't. That's the thing is we didn't. And because if you want to learn things like that, then you're talking about bringing in African American studies. Then you're talking about bringing in Mexican American studies, Latin American studies. You're talking about feminism in high schools and middle schools, why is identity not a priority? You know what I mean? And
they just want to keep the history white and clean because they're trying to do away with the slave trade. What do they want to? They're calling it something
servants.
now. The
immigrants
or immigrants, servants,
or something. The something trade. The triangular. What is? Some BS name that they have for it now.
Well, it becomes it's suffocating to our kids simply because they get caught in this scheduled life that there's nothing exciting about education, and so why would I go to college if that's what you're offering me?
Right.
If that's my experience with education, and so coming in and teaching writing in this way, in a way of there's nothing behind it. There's no agenda behind it besides you and your voice and your story. And it's so funny because the first year I learned so much about how our students value themselves, and they don't. I mean, I've had young girls that tell me, I'm just waiting to get married at 14. And that blows my mind because the year 2019, how are you talking like this? It's 2019 with all this women empowerment, and you're talking like, I'm just waiting to get married. And it kills me because I have a daughter, right? And it kills me, and I think that these kids deal with so much, and that first year we learned so much that we realized that it's so much bigger than the arts, that we need social emotional learning.
Yes. And technology is not really helping with that.
No.
I mean, the human contact and human connection is there's a huge gap between that because of these things.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's sad. Go ahead.
And we realize quickly that once we empower these kids, the question of what's next or what else kept coming to us. Right? And these kids would get so excited every time they would see me, and they're like, "What's up? What happens in the summer?" And I'm like, "Oh, nothing. I mean, you have a good summer." And they look at me like, yo, what's up with that? Like, that's whack. You coming in here, you get us hype, you get me writing, you get me performing, and that's it. And I'm like, all right. Well, let's figure it out then. Let's figure it out.
Yeah.
After that, our first anthology was born.
Okay.
Right, and we called it. Decided to call it "They Say" because in poetry, everyone's always a they or a he or a she or a her, and so I'm like, "They say." I'm like, all right, well, let's see if we can do some poetry. Let's create a book. At that time, we had 3 schools and 1 lockdown.
Right.
I got into a juvenile detention center later on the first year because my kids kept disappearing. And I was like, where's this kid? He goes, oh, he got into a fight. He's locked up. I'm like, well, where's this kid? He's like, oh, he's been skipping a lot. So he got tickets and now he's locked up. And I started just looking into it and I realized that the school to prison pipeline is real.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And it's vicious.
Yeah.
And it's vicious. And I'm like, okay, well, let me figure out where they're at. And I started calling around and I wound up at a place called Leadership Academy, which is in Katy, deep in Katy. Oh my gosh, it's such a drive. Our kids are there. They go do 6 months.
6 months for what?
It could be truancy. It could be fighting. It could be being disruptive. It can be shoplifting. I mean, it could be the smallest things that any other kid would get a second chance at.
Right.
But
which happened back in the old days. So what I always say is that the kinds of things that these kids are locked up for, shoplifting, truancy, fighting, I would have been locked up. But I was chastised, spoken to, given a second, third, fourth, fifth chance.
Right.
And unfortunately, these young people are locked away, hidden from society.
So I went in there, I talked to everyone, and I was like, you know what? My classes have to continue because our kids are here. And they were like, we welcome you. Started working in there. As a matter of fact, it worked so well that they were included in our first anthology, the kids that were incarcerated. And they don't have last names in our books.
Okay.
So if you see a student without a last name, they're incarcerated.
Okay.
And I mean, their stories are so amazing, and there's so much. I mean, there's just so much pain. So we've been working with girls that are sexually trafficked to just young kids that, I mean, you open up all these emotions, and you realize that you're accountable to them. And a big part of what I'm doing now is just, how do we follow up with you? How do we keep empowering you? How do we keep following you? This first class that I had at Sharpstown High School was beautiful because I actually followed them all the way till they graduated. Oh. So 4 years. 4 years. 4-year relationship. How beautiful is that, right? Like I got a chance to see these kids grow. Yeah. And I got a chance to see, and it's so funny because if you see these kids perform and you read the books and you're like, wait, these are not like kids from HSPVA. These are not. I'm like, no, these are kids that have never written anything before.
Right.
But they just have a story, and you got to bring it out of them. You know, we got a chance to raise money with this book, and we got a chance to give kids partial scholarships and get them into HCC and trade schools. Man, we got chances to buy trades. So we had to rethink what it is to empower our students after high school. I think the statistic is that if you're a black or brown kid, if you go to a 4-year university, there's a 10% chance you'll graduate in the first 4 years.
Yeah.
10%. That is an insane number. So out of all the kids that go to the universities, only 10% will graduate in the first 4 years.
That's wild.
And then the numbers start dwindling down because they just start dropping out. And so our principals really pushed us to, like, we understand that you guys are creating a scholarship. Let's redefine what scholarship is to us. And that's the coolest part about what we're doing. We constantly redefine what it is to work with people and students and teachers and principals and our communities, because you have to. You have to, because not everything fits every kid. Right? If a kid is incarcerated and a kid is out in the free, you have to cater to this kid.
Yeah. And so, what do we know what's happening to these kids that are locked up? I mean, are they getting education while they're there?
They are getting schooled. They are getting schooled. But the problem is when they get out, they get out. I mean, it's not that, I did my time, I'm free, I'm good now. Right. No, they most of the times they go to another school. They get sent to another school, and they're on probation. And it's sad to say that a big part of people that work in the system is to keep these kids in the system. So they're walking on thinner ice once they come out. They are, it's everything that they're going through now gets multiplied because now all of a sudden there's a chance they might get locked up. So everything that they do, you go back. And heaven forbid you're 16, 17, because you're not going back to a juvenile detention center.
Right. Next time you're going to the big jail.
To the big jail, right?
You listen to Access Houston, talking to Marlon Lizama, Program Director of Iconoclast Artist, and Jovón Tyler, who is the chairman of the board. So your third book is out. They Say Volume 3.
Yes.
Portrait. I can't wait to read these because I know these kids have so much to say. Yes. And this is incredible. So how long has this one been? We debuted that one last year. So every May we come out with a student anthology. Okay. And so what happened this year, at the end of last year, I had a kid come up to me and tell me, I really love what you guys are doing, but the problem is I don't speak English. Can you do this in Spanish? And I'm like, I'll tell you what, if you get me a class, I'll do it.
I thought he was going to give me like 12 kids, 10 kids. He got me 40.
Whoa.
40 students that have been here 2 years or less that only spoke Spanish. And I'm like, oh my gosh. Like, I speak Spanish, and that was my first language, but it turns out like, oh snap, I forgot Spanish, so I had to like re-educate myself. Yeah. And I quickly found out that the things that were in the curriculum is not as easy as translating it to Spanish, because where these kids are coming from, they don't, it's a disconnect of American culture. Yeah. So, hip hop, to some of these kids, I'm like, what is that? So where Lauryn Hill and J. Cole works in these classes, it's not going to work in a kid that, so you have to create a curriculum that's in Spanish. And like, so I'm back at square one, right? So the beginning of this year, I went back to square one of like finding what works, what doesn't work. So these have been my most challenging classes, but they have been the most empowering classes to me.
I'm sure.
Because I was that 9-year-old that came.
Yeah.
I was that 9-year-old that came here, right? I was that immigrant kid. And so it inspired me to like realize that there's some kids that are not even connected to their schools. There's some kids that are shadows in their schools because they don't speak the language. And now we have 3 schools that we're doing Spanish poetry in. And this year, in May 2nd, at the Museum of Fine Arts, we're coming out with 2 anthologies, one in English and one in Spanish.
Oh, nice.
And this is going to be our first Spanish anthology.
And this is going to be a big deal.
It's a huge deal. And every year, it's like 500 people show up, 600 people to go hear these amazing kids read poetry, and it's their poetry, and it's from their books. Yeah. And we're not advertising it like, come see these poor brown and black kids. No, it's like, yo, come hear really good poetry and support a really good program.
And that's how I got involved, is I just by happenstance showed up to hear the first anthology, and literally it changed my entire life, because I'm a kid from Cashmere Gardens, 5th Ward area, and with each kid that spoke, they were speaking about my life and my struggle and where I came from. And so immediately that night, I walked up to Matt and Marlon and I said, how can I become involved? And that is where my journey began with these young people. Like Marlon said, May 2nd, Thursday at 7 p.m. At the Museum of Fine Arts, Houston. I would encourage anybody to come to this event because it will completely transform the way life. You're seeing Houston's kids. These are kids that were essentially thrown away by parts of the school system. Just thrown away, given up on.
And not realizing the incredible potential and promise that they have.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. And it really is their night. They stand in front of 700 strangers and express themselves in a way that, for many of them, they were never given the opportunity. Yeah. And it'll make you weep.
Yeah. I want to be there on Thursday, May the 2nd, to witness this. There's another poetry group around who I've had on the program as well, and I was a judge at one of the competitions, and these teenagers just blew me away.
I mean, it's incredible.
Adults, we are so quick to write off the young ones.
Absolutely.
And, you always hear about that. Oh, the millennials this, and, Generation Y is that, and Generation Z, oh, they're so lost. Yeah. The ones that I come in contact with, and I'm talking from ages 18 to 24, they've got a pretty good head on their shoulder. They get it. They know. And I know that, they have more resources and can find out things, more than we did. But I'm not so quick to write them off. I mean, the children really are our future. And with the ones that I come in contact with, I feel okay.
Sure. Yeah. Sure.
Like the future, is bright.
Right.
Where can people get more information on the May 2nd event at the Museum of Fine Arts for Iconoclast Artists?
Yeah, so everybody can follow us on Instagram at Iconoclast Artists, and you can follow us on Facebook at Iconoclast Sessions, and our website is iconoclastartists.org. Plural, artists, plural, so yeah.
So you had asked before we went on air, like, how long would this be? I said, probably about, 10 or so minutes. We ended up talking the whole entire segment, which is 25 minutes.
Hey, there you go.
Do I get a minute to sort of thank some of our sponsors?
Sure.
Okay. So Lim Design graciously have come and have helped design our book, all 4, maybe 5 anthems. We have a new partnership with the University of Houston School of Social Work that we're very, very excited about. And businesses, all kinds of businesses over the last 5 years have sponsored our book. This year, we are pleased that George H. Lewis and Sons is one of our corporate sponsors. Nice. So we thank all of those.
Thank you so much, man. I think at the end of the day, is these kids need to be heard.
Yeah, absolutely.
They need to be heard. So I'll definitely, and I'll leave you the first and second.
Oh, the first.
And so you can have all of them.
I got all
and then,
3.
And then on May 2nd, you come and get the new ones. And we invite everybody. Just come out, even if it's just to go hear some really good stuff. Be a part of it.
Indeed. Marlon Lizama, Program Director of Iconoclast. Thank you, Jovón Tyler, the chairman of the board of Iconoclast, man. Thank you guys for coming on. This was some great
Thank you for having us. We really appreciate you.
No doubt.
Thank you.
And thank you for listening to Access Houston.